The following podcast is an exclusive presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Thank you for coming to the Project Entertainment Network store. Please place your order. A good choice. A t-shirt for the horror show with Brian Keene. Amanda Method coffee mug. There's more. A Necrocast on hoodie. That's sharp. But why on earth would you want bizonged leggings? Wait, are you Mr. Frank? The Project Entertainment Network store, stacked with goodies from all your favorite podcasts. T-shirts, hoodies, mugs and more. www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
There shall come a podcast like no other. Defenders Dialogue with Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Marvel Comics' original superhero non-team convenes once again. The Incredible Hulk, the Savage Submariner, the Master of the Mystic Arts, Doctor Strange, and a dynamic supporting cast of Marvel superheroes battle against evil as the Defenders. Without further ado, true believers, here's your hosts, Brian Keene and Christopher Golden. Excelsior!
And welcome back once again, true believers, to Defenders Dialogue. I'm Brian Keene.
And I am Christopher Golden, Brian, and I say Excelsior. And I also want to say to listeners, we're accidentally seeing each other today. Normally we Skype this just by audio, and it's a little surreal to actually see you while we're recording.
It's weird. It's weird. And you're recording in your office. I am recording in the living room because I have workmen outside spraying insulation into the attic, and their equipment is way too loud to record out in the studio today.
There you go.
So, yeah.
There you go.
So today we're covering what? Defenders 118 and 119?
118 and 119, and 118 has, for people like you and me, who love the horror characters of the 70s and 80s, 118 has one of the great covers of all time, which is Damon Hellstrom, the son of Satan, standing over the fallen doppelganger. We don't know on the cover which one is intended to be which, although I could guess here. So it's two Damon Hellstroms, two sons of Satan for the price of one, on the cover here. And it's written by J.M. DeMatteis, penciled by Don Perlin, and inked in this case by Mashinsky and Milgram.
That's right. And before we start unpacking the issue, that cover, for the era, this was 1983. Mm-hmm. Most of Marvel's covers still had word balloons, dialogue, at least caption boxes on the cover. This is iconic in the fact that it has none of those. It doesn't even have a background. It relies on just shading and color to tell you what's going on, and it's a fantastic cover.
Yeah, and we're getting into this place in Marvel history and in comics in general as you get toward the mid '80s. You're starting to see a real changeover, particularly on the covers of comics, but also, of course, in the interiors of the kinds of comics that are being published. And we're going to see a lot of really interesting covers coming up in this series as we get into the new Defenders. But
agreed. So we go to Georgetown in the District of Columbia. Now, while Damon Hellstrom is no stranger to listeners of this show, we did not cover his appearances before the Defenders. But Georgetown University is his base of operations, so to speak. And after all that time in the Defenders, he has finally returned here.
Right. We'll give that sales plug to Marvel and say that most of the Son of Satan appearances from this era in his own comic are collected in one large Son of Satan classic edition or whatever it might be. So you can get those, and I love those comics. And we talked about potentially doing them here, and maybe we will at some point. But yes, so he is a professor of parapsychology, which puts him in the same. If he were at Columbia, he'd be teaching with Peter Venkman of the Ghostbusters.
Now there is Son of Satan pitch for the MCU. That's how we do it.
Son of Satan, Ghostbusters.
Yep. MCU's version of Ghostbusters with Damon Hellstrom. And it can even be a running bit that people keep mispronouncing his name. Damien and Hellstorm. And,
Yeah. But he would be the Egon Spengler character.
Yeah, exactly. Play him straight, and everyone around him reacts.
Yeah, exactly.
But we get a 1-page recap, and basically Damon is musing to himself that this is where he started. This was the place he thought of as home, but how could it really be that when he's been gone away from it for so long without even looking back? We get a recap of the Six-Fingered Hand saga. His everything that happened back in Defenders 116. We also get a reference to Marvel Team Up 126, in which he and fellow Defender Luke Cage fight Satan. I promise we will recap that Marvel Team Up in a future episode. But basically, he stayed away from this place. We also learn that he had a girlfriend here. Now, even though he's in love with Patsy Walker, Hellcat, there was another woman here whom he had strong feelings for. Serapha Thames is her name, and she's a fellow professor. And he says that, she was, without the warmth, the support that she gave him, his heart could never have awakened as it did when he first met Patsy. She was the first woman, the first person to show him that the possibility for love could even exist.
Yeah, and what's really interesting about this is it's so, and I hate to say it in these terms, but it is so real and so human to have this. It humanizes him so much because
Absolutely.
It's so common for men and women to basically say, like, particularly if you've had a difficult upbringing, that, you have to have someone who sort of, awakens your mind. Or like if you've been through a terrible breakup, sometimes you need somebody to sort of, pull you out of that, darkness. And that's not the person you end up with, right?
Exactly. But I think it also speaks to the duality of Damon's self, because he is the son of Satan. He's constantly caught between, the impulses of heaven and the impulses of his dark soul, hell.
Yeah.
That he willingly just walked away from this woman, walked away from this job, and just hasn't even given it a thought.
For a year. I mean, or close to a year from what we're establishing. He's been gone for quite a while.
Right.
Even though he's the head of the parapsychology department. And then strange things are afoot, Brian, because she runs up to him and throws her arms around him and says, "Hello, darling. How's your day been so far? Anderson giving you any grief?" And he's stunned to find that she kisses him, and then she runs off as if she had just seen him hours ago.
Right.
And that they're currently a couple. And then a student comes up and says, "Oh, I guess I'm not late for class because you're not there yet. So as long as I'm not beaten there by you." So he goes on to class, and then Hellstrom runs to the classroom where he anticipates an empty podium, Brian.
Right. And instead, he sees himself standing behind the podium, chastising the student for being late. And the student's thinking, how'd he do that? What kind of magic trick is that?
Exactly.
But it's not. It seems that Damon Hellstrom has a doppelganger.
Yeah, and he's rocked by the fact that this Damon Hellstrom is here. Now, before we get into it, I don't want to forget that I love this story. I'd have to go back and look at the publication date, but it reminds me tremendously of the classic Harlan Ellison story, Shatterday.
Oh, yes.
Which was also an influence on my novel, Dead Ringers. So, very sort of classic pose. He's been through so much psychologically that he's rocked by seeing his doppelganger teaching the class, realizing that he's been carrying on in his place, that he's got this relationship with Serapha, and he goes to his office, which, surprising to him, still has his name on it.
That's right. And as he's going through the office, he finds a framed photograph of himself and Serapha. They're smiling. They look happy. There's just one problem, Chris. That photograph was never taken. He has no memory of this photograph of the two of them being taken.
He starts to have an immediate identity crisis. He looks in the mirror. Right. What's happening to me? Is the face in the mirror my own, or have I merely imagined it's mine? He's not sure. He's even Damon Hellstrom now. He's really rocked by this because in a weird way, this life that he has just stumbled upon is a better life than the one he's been living. It's a more normal life, a more settled life, just sort of a happier life in general, less troubled. And then the doppelganger, Damon Hellstrom, walks in. And I do love this moment where the doppelganger says, Damon Hellstrom at your service. I don't believe we've been introduced, Mr. And Son of Satan says, you know my name, in a furious 4-balloon piece of dialogue.
And now we're gonna what do we call the other Son of Satan? The doppelganger? Is that what we'll call him?
Yeah, let's just call him the doppelganger.
Okay. He stays calm. He says there's really no need for such emotional outbursts. And Hellstrom, true to form, he's having none of this nonsense. Who are you? What manner of trickery is this? And the doppelganger says, I'm who I appear to be. And they don't use the psychic nether trident that you love so much, Chris, but they do use their psychic powers. They touch their hands to each other's temples, and sure enough, Damon says in the narration, he says, I who have faced the lords of hell without fear, recoil in abject horror. For what seems an eternity, I stand rapt, my gaze locked upon this shadow self. But he is not a shadow self. He is real. And what Damon sees is his own soul reflected back at him.
Yeah, I mean, it's this impossible thing. He doesn't know what to do about it. So when he leaves, we stay with the doppelganger, right, in the darkened office, and the doppelganger whispers, "Go, please, just go away."
Right.
Then we have an interlude with with a most unlikely pair of friends who continue to be friends. They've created a bond.
Do you think
and that
it's
would
unlikely?
be what's that?
Do you really think it's unlikely that Gargoyle and Hellcat would become friends?
Well, under the circumstances, I mean, she was so furious at him for so long, and now she's sort of overcome that, and they've become buddies.
She cares about Dolly, and now we know that he and Dolly are in love with each other.
Yes. So now she's come around, in the way that reluctant stepdaughters sometimes do.
So it's like me trying to bond with Mary San Giovanni's son.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
All right.
So it's So Patsy is at the typewriter. She's decided she wants to write her memoirs, basically. But it's turned out, Brian, strangely enough, like many people, Patsy has discovered that writing is not as easy as it seems.
J.M. DeMatteis getting all sorts of meta right there.
I've always wanted to write a novel. Patsy is the person who would stand up at a reading or a Q&A session at the end of a reading and say and make a long statement instead of asking a question.
And that's reason number 727 why I do not care for this character.
Anyway, so Patsy and Isaac are hanging out, and he's trying to inspire her, trying to encourage her to work on her book. And she feels like she's growing up. She says, there's just so long I can go running around playing superheroine. And then she says, now that's funny. A few years back, there was nothing I wanted more than a flashy costume, a dramatic name, and a chance to hobnob with the super set. But Isaac realizes that all of this is just a distraction from what's really bothering her. That she's worried about Damon. He took off. She had told him that she loved him, and in that classic rom-com fashion, he did not respond. He has not yet said that.
Right. We then transition back to Georgetown and Damon, who is paying a visit to his ex. And she greets him, why did you cut class today? Apparently, she doesn't realize that this is the real Damon and not the doppelganger. She offers him dinner. But he says, "I am not hungry, at least not for food. What I desire are answers." Um, we then learn, and we know this, of course, from reading Son of Satan's own comic, but Serapha is a witch. She is one of the Wicca, the workers of white magic, the high priestess of her coven. And so she uses her psychic link and discovers that he is not her Damon Hellstrom.
Exactly. He reveals himself as the son of Satan, which of course she would know anyway. And then the doppelganger comes in. She runs to him, "Darling, thank the goddess you're home." And he ushers her out of the room so that we can have a Damon on Damon conflict. And then the doppelganger reveals to Hellstrom that his wife, so now we know that he and Serapha are married, is pregnant.
That's right.
So basically, it's and Serapha's in the other room. She's trying to cast a spell to get rid of the newly arrived Hellstrom. It gets a little confusing talking about it, but it's easy to follow.
It does. If you have the art in front of you.
Yes.
And when I post this episode to YouTube, I'll include a few panels to illustrate that.
Well, especially include the panels of the actual fight, which is so great. It's the Hellstrom on Hellstrom fight, in which, Brian, I will say, it's the Nether Trident on Nether Trident battle to end all Nether Trident battles. The psychosensitive metal of his Nether Trident.
And the battle goes awry for Damon, for our Damon. He lies gasping, weak, covered in his own blood. He has fought the battle for his sanity, for his own precious identity, and he is lost.
There you go. And then we have our second interlude, and Brian, this is all you, my friend.
Yeah, I gave you Hellcat. We return to somewhere, somewhen, where Luann Bloom and the elf with the gun are still riding in a Model T Ford through a misty call. Luann says, "I know I should be frightened, but I'm not. That doesn't make any sense, does it?" And the elf with the gun says, "Sure it does, toots. You're catching on is all. You're remembering who you are." And Luann insists, "Remembering? I know who I am. I'm Luann Bloom. I used to work for Kyle Richmond before he was killed by his so-called friends in the Defenders." The elf with the gun suggests that none of that is true. And then the flying Model T approaches a city that, if you're a classic horror fan, think the city from William Hope Hodgson's The Nightland. That's what this is like. And the elf with a gun explains to her that this city exists at the very end of time. At which point, a brand new villain, or I should say brand new villains, pop up. They are called the Tribunal. That's all we know about them. And they tell the elf with a gun, it's a big reveal here, Chris. Turns out elf with a gun is not his name. His name is Agent number 334A/W, which would seem to imply that there are more elves with guns running around the Marvel Universe. I
had never thought of it quite that way. I thought that maybe all the agents were different, but I do like the idea that they all are elves with guns.
That's right. Or maybe they're all Luann Blooms, because we then find out the Tribunal refers to Luann Bloom as TB number 6C. And we don't know what that means, but they tell her they are growing impatient and that she had better give them a report. And Luann is like, "What the hell?" And the elf with a gun tells her, "Well, don't just stand there, toots, spill it before the judge pulls out your plug." And on that ominous note, the interlude ends.
The interlude ends. And I just want to say to anybody listening to this, from now on, I hope that when any of you see Brian Keene in public, you call him Toots.
Toots.
Please go up and say, "Howdy, Toots."
Or even better, go on social media and demand that Marvel allow me to write an Elf with a Gun miniseries.
As long as it can be credited to Brian Toots Keene.
There we go. A quick aside, I actually pitched a version of The Exiles in which Elf with a Gun was a central character. He was basically the leader of the team.
I like it.
It made sense. It made sense to me.
Was the number one villain the Headman?
No, but it was all these time-lost Marvel characters. It was Elf with a Gun, Killraven, the original Deathlock, all these characters from the Flotsam and Jetsam of alternate realities.
Mm-hmm.
Skull the Slayer. So, of course, 3 people would have bought it, but
I would have been one of them. I would give pretty much anything to write Killraven and Deathlock.
Oh, hell yeah.
The Luther Manning Deathlock, of course.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, anyway, so we go back. We're still in the middle of this fight between the two Hellstroms. And Hellstrom, like so many other times in his life, is having an identity crisis. And yet, when pushed to the edge, he's saying, I am Damon Hellstrom. I'm sorry. I'm flipping the script here because I was looking. So I'm sorry. It is our Damon who has finally gotten the upper hand in this fight with the doppelganger, and the doppelganger is insisting that he is Damon Hellstrom, and he says to our Damon, "You yourself said that the life you have always craved is the life I live. Think, who is to say where identity ends and delusion begins? Is mere belief enough to prove title to oneself, or is something more needed? A strength of will, a surety of purpose, a commitment to life." And he manages to get the better of our Damon and turn the tables on him. And he's got him dead to rights, trident to his throat. And he's starting to wonder about his own value. And then he says, "A life I suddenly realized, much like the one I have known for nearly 30 years, then why not forsake, renounce, leave, vow what would be lost that was not lost long ago? Nothing. Something. And what's the one thing that he feels like he has that he's always wanted that this other Damon, though he seems to have a perfect life, doesn't have?"
Patsy Walker.
Patsy Walker. So fuck you, Brian Keene.
Love is blind, my friend. Love is blind.
Anyway, our Damon grabs hold of the nether trident, and because he is the one true Damon Hellstrom, he sends his hellfire up through the trident, turning the doppelganger into a raging inferno that burns. In the other room, Serapha, trying to do her white magic, screams, and all is revealed, Brian.
That's right. It turns out, and I found this as an occultist myself, I found this fascinating what DeMatteis does here. It turns out the doppelganger is a demon. And Damon recognizes him. He says, "I know you. You're a demon of my father's domain, but your name eludes me." The number one rule in demonology is that you can't have power over a demon unless you know its name. Naming is everything when it comes to demons. And this demon tells Damon, with good reason, "Your father never saw fit to give me a name."
He was so lowly, so nothing, that he never even got a name.
Right. So long story short, during the Six-Fingered Hand saga, you'll remember that Hell actually invaded Earth. The dimensions broke down between the two. When Satan and all the forces of Hell returned home, this little demon stayed. And he took Damon's name and Damon's life. And, he stayed here in Georgetown, and he fell in love with what's her name, Serapha.
Yep.
And
she thought for the longest time that he was Damon Hellstrom.
Right.
But by the time she figured it out, she didn't care.
Yeah. And that's what she tells Hellstrom. She says, at first I thought he was you. I knew that you were warmer, more attentive, more loving than you normally were. And then after a time, I learned the truth, but it didn't matter because I loved him.
Yeah. And again, so basically, when Hellstrom sees what is really going on here, the demon adopts another countenance. He doesn't look like Hellstrom anymore. He adopts another human identity, and they say, "We'll go away. We'll leave. We'll start anew somewhere else." And he goes along with it.
Now, I have a question for you. Looking at the artwork, you're looking at a colorized version. I'm looking at the original black and white. The new form that this demon adopts, does that look like Eric Simon Payne to you?
No.
No?
No. I mean, it's Perlin drawing it, so maybe, but it's clearly not Eric Simon Payne.
See, it looks to me like Perlin purposely drew Devil Slayer in that panel, who, in continuity, is doing time in a jail in, Israel or someplace, right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's done being Devil Slayer, so I don't know.
I mean, we can ask him.
We will ask him. So anyway, yeah, our Damon, the real Damon, leaves, and he can't go home. He obviously he can't stay here at the university. He can't go home to the Defenders or to Patsy. He can do nothing until he has found the truth. Until he has found Damon Hellstrom.
He should join EST. People from the 80s will get that. Okay, Defenders
now,
119.
I'm going to guess that you did not like issue 119 as much as you did 118.
I did not like it nearly as much as I did 118, but I still liked it.
Okay.
It's an odd issue in many ways because it's a fill-in, Brian.
Right.
But it's a fill-in that does further the story. The fill-in is written by longtime Marvel writer and writer of all kinds of comics for other companies, Stephen Grant.
That's right.
It's penciled by Sal Buscema.
So nice to see him back on the Defenders again.
Yep, and inked by Jack Abel. So, of course, the art does have a classic Defenders feel to it, and
right.
Stephen Grant is certainly a talented writer.
And you should notice in the credit box, DeMatteis does get a credit for invaluable assistance. So I would guess that he and Stephen Grant conferred on the plot, and he let him know, well, here's where this storyline is going. So yeah, we open with the elf with a gun and Luann Bloom, and they're in a spotlight, and she looks terrified. It says her name is Luann Bloom, and she was once nurse to the deceased Defender called Nighthawk.
These are two batshit crazy pages, by the way. Just throwing that out there, but go ahead.
Basically, she doesn't know where she is. She doesn't know why she's there. And she will quickly learn she doesn't even know what she is. She demands of the tribunal, who are you? What are you doing with me? And they tell her again, do your report. And she snaps. She snaps on them. She snaps on the elf. She says, enough of this bullying. Your little man dragged me here. He can show me the way out. And the elf with a gun says, I'm a little man with big laughs. You're a twist with a twist. And then he rips Luann's face off, revealing what, Chris?
Luann is a recorder, Brian.
Yeah, she's a robot. Straight out of Westworld.
Leanne is a robot. Potentially an android, but definitely a robot. And they basically say that she was placed on Earth to record holographic images, to make a report back to the tribunal, to gain the confidence of Kyle Richmond. And they insist that she report, and she has thought balloons that say, oh, Lord, it's all true, and I can't stop myself. I'm sorry, Kyle, so sorry. And her eyes broadcast the holographic film that gives a recap. That's right.
And we see the battle with the 6-fingered hand. We go back to Ed Hannigan's run and see the battle with the Mandrill. Mm-hmm. We see the Defenders for a Day saga. We don't see Tunnel World, and for that I'm very grateful. And then the tribunal has her stop, where we see the Hulk fighting a woman who we don't know, and we're told that this story takes place between Defenders issue 68 and 69.
And I know that the big reveal in this issue was very pleasing to you.
Well, it was. I love the old Defenders villains, so yes. Spoiler alert: we bring back Yandroth.
You're telling people now?
Yeah, I mean, this was the original villain. He's the reason the Defenders were founded. I'm not going to tell him how he comes back. I'm going to tell him that Hulk is fighting a woman, and not having much luck with it.
Yeah, she has a force field and gravity powers, so she's protecting herself, and then she smashes the Hulk away with her gravity powers. And when she goes to check on him, she wants to implant something into the Hulk, but when she gets there, the Hulk is awake and just gets madder. And the madder Hulk gets, Brian, the stronger Hulk gets. He grabs her by this is what the argument that I would always have with my kids when they were little was who would win, Hulk versus Superman or Hulk versus, what's the character from Dragon Ball?
Goku?
Goku, yeah. And I would say it's always got to be Hulk because eventually he will be strong enough to beat anybody.
Against Goku, yeah, Hulk's going to win. Against Superman, I could write that story. And instead of fighting him, Superman would try to befriend him. And then he would win. Because Hulk wouldn't be mad.
Yeah, Hulk would be mad because he would just be like, "You're so vanilla, dude. I'm going to kick your ass."
So anyway, this woman, she implants a microscopic device into the Hulk's brain, and he suddenly gently sets her down and begins speaking with her voice, almost like a puppet on strings. And then the two of them vanish.
Mm-hmm. Then we go back to the moment. A moment from a previous Defenders issue where Nighthawk is trying to bust a Bronco on Kyle Richmond's, was it Long Island ranch?
Which was destroyed in their battle with the Fool Killer.
Exactly.
Yep.
And I love this moment because Kyle in costume is on the back of this horse trying to get it to calm down. It throws him, and Valkyrie in street clothes is sitting up on the fence watching, and she laughs her ass off when he falls and then mocks him.
Yep.
You were so masterful, Kyle. So basically, then Hellcat pulls up in her car. It's very much a flashback to that earlier era. And then that same woman shows up with the Hulk, and she's speaking with her own voice and through the Hulk. There's a battle with Nighthawk and Hellcat and Valkyrie.
And then she takes over. I mean, not to put too fine a point on it, but she takes over Nighthawk the same way she did the Hulk. And as she's fighting Valkyrie, she says, "Stand up and fight. I've wanted to pay you back for a long time, honey, for destroying my Omegatron." And Valkyrie is very confused. Omegatron? But Yandroth built the Omegatron.
Exactly.
And as we know, Yandroth was male.
But then, of course, the reveal comes, and as she takes over Valkyrie's mind, we find out that somehow this woman is indeed Yandroth.
That's right. What happens is we transition to Doctor Strange's sanctum,
and she does take over Hellcat, by the way. So she now has control of Hellcat, Hulk, Valkyrie, and Nighthawk.
Yeah. So they show up, and Clea, she says, "Hey, Steven, the Hulk is coming to the front door." And he says, "Well then, let us greet him and bring him in off the street before he attracts attention." And he says, "Welcome, my friend." And Hulk says, "Strange." At last, Doctor Strange realizes, okay, this is not the Hulk. But Hulk punches him.
This reminds me of the moment in the first Avengers movie where the Hulk punches Thor.
Yeah, exactly. Clay goes to stop him, and the woman takes over Clay as well. So basically, all of the Defenders now mind-controlled except for Doctor Strange. And the woman tells Doctor Strange that she is, in fact, Yandroth. That when Yandroth died back in Defenders issue number 5, his disembodied spirit floated around in the ether and found this woman working in a lab, trapped in a menial position by idiots who couldn't comprehend her genius. and Yandroth possessed her, and now the two of them exist in this one body.
There you go.
So Doctor Strange calls for help, and who does he call, Chris?
Well, Doctor Strange's astral body reaches out and summons the Submariner. And I like when she says, "You, the Submariner," and Namor says, "Who else would Doctor Strange summon in his hour of need?"
Luke Cage, Silver Surfer, Daredevil, the list goes on and on.
But Namor's like, "Of course it's me." Anyway, there's a fight, but of course she's controlling the other defenders, so she puts the Hulk to use. There's a fight between Namor and the Hulk, and then she manages to take over Namor.
That's right. But as she does that, Doctor Strange frees the Hulk and Valkyrie.
Doctor Strange is in his astral form.
Right.
Yes. Frees the Hulk and Valkyrie, causing, once again, a defender-on-defender battle.
Yep.
Yeah, classic. So then we don't have to spend too much time with this. It's fight, fight, fight.
There is one good throwaway Hulk line, because every time Hulk and Namor fight, there's a good... Hulk doesn't know why he fights Fishman, but if Fishman is making Hulk's head hurt, Hulk will smash.
Exactly.
Hulk echoes how I feel every time I get a migraine, Chris.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah. So basically, at the end, the defenders join minds to fight Yandroth, and they defeat the Yandroth in this woman's body. Shatters her mind as well. The projection ends. We return to the tribunal here in the city at the end of time, with robot Luann Bloom showing them all this. The tribunal says that Yandroth could have been useful to their mysterious purposes, and that they cannot pass up any edge over the defenders. And then they tell the elf with a gun that time grows short. Their mission must move into the final phase. The defenders must be destroyed, or time itself will die.
And I love, and I have to say, this moment, this splash page at the end, reminded me so much of the writing of our dear detractor Tom Sniegoski.
Yeah.
Because the defenders must be destroyed, the drama of this, or time itself will die, in big, bold letters. And then at the bottom of the page, the elf with a gun has a little word balloon, and he just says, "Yeah!" And so you don't end on, "and time itself will die." You end on the elf going, "Yeah!" Which, anybody who read Tom's classic long run on Vengeance of Vampirella and Vampirella Strikes will know that he loved to have characters in his comics that do stuff like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So next week, folks, we will get back to Damon Hellstrom's search for himself, and finally, the Defenders will be all reunited. Overmind, Valkyrie, Gargoyle, Hellcat, Son of Satan, everybody. Beast. And we should mention, this is the beginning of the end. Not only for the Defenders, but for J.M. DeMatteis's run. The big changes are in store.
Yeah, big changes are afoot for sure, because by the time we get to issue 122, which continues this story, so now we have 120, 121, 122, we're starting to see the membership changes that are leading to... By the way, this is one of my favorite stories in the entire run of the Defenders that's coming up. Yeah. The story that involves Patsy and Damon Hellstrom, and paves the way for the new Defenders.
And as an Elf with a Gun fan, it's one of my favorite stories. I mean, the cover of 122, it's the entire Defenders assembled against one little elf with a gun.
Yep.
I mean, it doesn't get any better than that.
Yeah, and we see the return of the Scarlet Witch and the Vision coming up. We see the arrival of Iceman, who, believe it or not, folks, will become a major member of the Defenders.
That's right.
And by the time we get to 124, really, we have the new Defenders lineup in place.
Yep.
So it isn't officially the new Defenders yet, but it becomes that in 125. So I think it'll be very interesting, sir.
It will. In the meantime, folks, if you enjoyed this show, and if you're a new listener, you can listen to previous episodes on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music, Spotify, YouTube. We're all over the place. We're always available for free, courtesy of the Project Entertainment Network. If you enjoyed this show, you might enjoy Chris's side project. It's called Three Guys with Beards. Airs every week with him, James Moore, and Jonathan Mayberry. You may also enjoy The Horror Show with Brian Keene. That also airs every week with myself, Mary San Giovanni, Dave Thomas, and Mike Lombardo.
There you go.
There we go. Chris, is there anything we're forgetting? Is there something you want to say?
Brian, I want to say Excelsior, true believers, and happy holidays to all. We still have a couple of episodes before we get to the end of the year. And I am so looking forward to not only getting to the end of the year, but getting to the new Defenders. And then figuring out where we go from there. We have so many places to go.
I think we've decided the champions, right?
Yes, champions is a short run. And I did buy those man things at your request. So
there we go.
So we have those. So anyway, yes,
right.
Excelsior True Believers.
See you next week, folks.
My Favorite Story, a podcast author anthology featuring short fiction from the hosts of the Project Entertainment Network shows.
Three Guys with Beards, Jim Moore, Jonathan Mayberry, and Chris Golden.
Tom Clark from Necrocast, Igborn.
Brian Keene of The Horror Show, Chuck Buda, and Armand Rosamilia of The Mando Method.
Mary San Giovanni of Cosmic Shenanigans.
Jay Wilburn from Matters of Faith. John Urbansick of Ink Stains.
Biz Zung's Mr. Frank.
Available on Kindle and in paperback and through the Project Entertainment Network store.
www.projectentertainmentnetwork.com.
You're listening to American Top 40. More tragedy in the news today. Kim Kardashian has a new baby. What the hell? There's nothing good to listen to. Hey, wait, what's this?
You gotta roll that out.
See, it makes me do weird things. I don't like it.
God damn it.
I'd
be going down on myself? Shit.
Hey guys, it's Bill,
Mick,
Maya,
and Junior
from the Unsupervised Podcast.
check us out every Thursday on the Project Entertainment Network.
Take a break from the stress of the world and come have a laugh with or at us.
Bill.
This has been an exclusive presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.